Raiders versus Colts. All right. I'm going to talk more about the playoff seedings than the actual game. I'll get into the game really quick here. Um, First and foremost, the Raiders have to stop the run. Um, the Colts are going to have Jonathan Taylor. And I knew that pretty early on. Like when he got hurt, whatever, okay, I was like, I know how this is going to go. He's going to come back specifically for the Raider game, and he's going to tear it up on us, all right? The Raiders did a really good job against the Chiefs at stopping the run. That has been probably the biggest struggle for the Raiders defense this season, has been stopping the run. If they can limit Jonathan Taylor, that would be huge for this game. The Colts last week, Christmas weekend, lost a huge game against the Falcons. A week before that, the Falcons lost to the Panthers. So I don't know what's going on there. The Falcons are like one of those teams that are just like any given Sunday. I really don't. I wish I could have seen more from the Colts and Falcons game. I don't know if they just did a really good job of stopping the run, the Falcons on the Colts, or if they just outright demolished them, or if the Colts just didn't show up to play. I don't know what it was. I saw a little bit of Gardner Minshew's, post game press conference, and he was essentially saying like, hey, we can't just go in here and expect to win all the time. Like, you have to go out there and play. These are NFL teams, yada, yada, yada. So at the end of the day, we have to stop Jonathan Taylor. We have to force turnovers like we have in the past 2 weeks, right? And I think I would like to see Josh Jacobs play. You got to develop the run game. You got to own the time of possession. And Aiden O'Connell has to play better. These last 2 weeks are huge. And I think the picture on the screen is probably a big example in why. I just saw Josh's comment. Okay. Playoff scenario. The Raiders, no matter what, the Raiders have to win out. And this was dating back to, the Chiefs game, right? I had this good gut feeling that we would win, but I was like I'm gonna put it all on the table and say, hey, we're gonna win this game. That doesn't mean that I was going in like guaranteeing it. I was just like, I'm feeling good about it. We beat the Chiefs. That's a massive hurdle. Now we have the Colts, who are, as you can see, they are currently the 7th seed in the AFC at 8-7, right? Because let me check, because I think the Raiders are 7-8. Yeah, I want to say that's true. Let's see here, NFL. Let's look at the standings. If my phone will load. Let's just say I'm right for now. 8-7, right? We'll just go down the list. Conference, please. Okay. As far as wins go, you have the Ravens at 12-3. They got a big win. We'll talk about that. Miami 11-4. They got a big win against the Cowboys. Cleveland 10-5. Kansas City's 9-6. Buffalo is 9-6. The Jaguars are 8-7. They have blown it since the beginning of the season. They were tied for the 1 seed at one point, and they had a very good shot at attaining the 1 seed at one point. They could lose to the Titans the final week of the season, and they could not be in the playoffs, period. The Jaguars. So that's not a good look. You also have the Colts and Texans at 8-7, tied with the Jags. So that's been a 3-way tie for a while now, and it's still going. One of those teams is obviously going to win the division. It's entirely possible that the other 2 teams don't even make the playoffs, depending on how games go. Pittsburgh's 8-7. The Bengals are 8-7. So right now we have Jags on top of the division because of probably whether it's divisional or conference wins. The Browns are a step ahead of everybody in the wild card race. They're going to make it. They'll probably beat the Jets and lock their way in. Bengals at the 6th seed. They have the Chiefs and the Browns. They could lose out. They already lost to the Steelers. But okay, as you can see on the picture, each team it says what they must do for the Raiders to make the playoffs. Okay, and they don't even show the Chiefs. But right now, I mean, it's not realistic at all, in my opinion. But the Chiefs could lose out, and the Raiders, if they were to win out, would win the division. Which only makes me think, man, and even without that scenario, it's like that Vikings game was such a big deal. Such a big deal for this team. If they could have just scored one touchdown, should Hunter Renfrow not have fumbled? I'm not going to blame it on him. It was a good punch out by the linebacker, but still, it's like we were in the red zone and everything. If the Raiders win that Vikings game, we too are 8-7. We're probably sitting above the Steelers right now. Probably not the Bills, but instead of needing all these teams to lose 2 games, we just need them to lose 1 game, right? So Bengals, Colts, Texans, Bills, they don't need to lose 1 game, and then we just need to win out and stay above the Steelers and Broncos. Luckily, with the Broncos and Colts, we kind of control our own destiny there. The Colts lost a big game to the Falcons. They need to lose 2 games, right? So if we beat them, that's their 2 games. We're above them as long as we win out. The Bengals, again, tough matchups coming up between the Chiefs and the Browns. I could see them losing both. They've already lost 1 game. They just need to lose 1 other game. That Bengals-Chiefs game is actually huge for the Raiders because it could go one way or the other. If the Bengals win that game and we beat the Colts, obviously at the end of the day, I'm saying all this assuming the Raiders win out. We very well could lose this weekend and ruined, right? But let's just say that the Raiders win out. If the Bengals win against the Chiefs, it is suddenly very possible that the Raiders could win the division the final week of the season. Now, the Chiefs play the Chargers week 18. Do I expect the Chargers to beat them? No. But they also have an interim head coach, and they played much better than they had all season against the Bills. They almost beat the Bills. And the Bills beat the Chiefs a couple weeks. And the Chiefs are struggling. Could it happen? Sure. It's a divisional game. Anything can happen. Any given Sunday, right? So I'm not expecting to win the division, but man, that would be insane. I mean, a home game in Vegas for the Raiders on an interim head coach, it's like, wow. I think the fact that the Raiders are even in this conversation is a testament to Antonio Pierce and just the coaching staff, the defense, Patrick Graham. But they already got what they needed from the Broncos. They got half of what they needed from the Bengals and the Colts and the Texans. The Texans have 2 divisional matchups coming up. They can lose one of those games. Suddenly the Raiders, should they win out, will be above them. So we just need, it says at the top, we need 6 of these 8 teams to do what they need to do for us to make it. In my opinion, the most realistic scenario for the Raiders is Browns, Bills, Raiders. So we need the Bengals, Colts, Texans, Steelers, and Broncos to lose games that they need to lose. Again, the Colts and Broncos, we control that. So that helps. So the teams that we can't control. Steelers, they're playing the Seahawks and the Ravens. It's possible that the Ravens will be sitting some starters the final week of the season if they have the 1 seed locked. If so, we're rooting hard for the Seahawks this weekend. Either way, we are. So, because we can't tell the future, right? Texans, again, 2 divisional matchups, Titans and Colts. We can handle the Colts. So, if we do, we can be rooting for the Colts the final week, and that's a very realistic thing that the Colts could beat the Texans, right? They could play spoiler on them. But so could the Titans. The Titans could absolutely play spoiler for either the Texans and the Jaguars the final week of the season. Because bear in mind that maybe the Colts, not the Colts, but maybe the Texans ruin what I'm saying, the whole Browns, Bills, Raiders thing, right? In the same breath, the Texans could go win the division, and the Jags could lose against the Titans the final week, and we would beat out the Jags, which, again, is insane to me considering they were looking at the 1 seed just like 4 weeks ago. So, I when the Raiders lost to the Vikings, it felt like there was no hope. It felt like, yeah, they might as well be eliminated. And I remember seeing a graphic that said it might have actually been after the Charger game, but it might have been going into the Charger game. So I can't guarantee which one this was, but I feel like it was going into the Chiefs game. The Raiders had a 2% chance at the playoffs. 2%. And suddenly they beat the Chiefs, and now it's like, well, when you really look at this list, it's kind of realistic. It's actually very realistic. I heard, I think, Peter Schrager say that currently the Raiders have a 12% chance at making the playoffs. Okay. Like, I guess. Um, but man, that would be fantastic to get another interim coach come in, take over for a coach that wasn't getting it done, losing record, and lead the team to the playoffs on a magical 4-game win streak, just like Rich Bazakia did. Get that 7th seed, go in there, and hey, go out there and do what you can, right? Whether or not they do make the playoffs, it's like, can Mark Davis make the mistake again of allowing that interim head coach to leave? You know, I think what Antonio Pierce has done already has earned him the spot. I think that beating the Chiefs is, at least right now, and this is probably kind of an ego thing for the Chiefs, for any Chiefs fans that may hear this, but right now the goal for the Raiders, the Chargers, and the Broncos is to beat the Chiefs. It's to beat them out, right? It's been a race for the past 8, 9 years that each of those teams has probably lost. So at the end of the day, that's what these teams are building for. I've seen many drafts where the Raiders come out of the first round with a corner or a safety, right? That's because they're trying to counter what the Chiefs are doing in the division. And then you see playoff teams like, say, the Bills or the Bengals or even the Chiefs who are trying to beat those other teams in the playoffs. That's how they're building their teams, right? It's like there's levels to it. So right now we're in the process of still beating out the Chiefs. But hey, I don't care what Travis Kelce says. The Raiders defense demolished them. Okay? The Raiders defense has demoralized the Chargers, and they have outright beat now the Chiefs offense. I know they struggled, but hey, it's still a testament, in my opinion, to the Raiders defense. If the Raiders can make that a consistent thing, you add that quarterback to this team and look out. That's just my opinion on that. So I think project number one this offseason, priority number one, is absolutely finding that quarterback, whether it's Justin Fields or a guy like Jaden Daniels, or if you can, Drake May, Michael Penix Jr., or even drafting a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round if you can, if you feel that he's got the talent to become an eventual starter. I guess you could run it back with Aiden O'Connell until perhaps that rookie shows that he can do it. But I don't know. I think, especially for a guy like Antonio Pierce, assuming that he is, going to be the coach, he's probably going to be in win now mode, and also assuming Mark Davis gives him a short-term deal, he knows that he has to go out there and prove it. He still has to prove it. Like he said, like his resume is on the grass. That's how it's going to be for him. So if he gets an off season to go out there and build his roster and gets a season to prove, like, hey, what can you really do? I think he's got to go out there and make a bunch of moves that say, I'm trying to win now. And that includes going for a quarterback, whether you trade up in the draft or you trade picks to go get Justin Fields, or I guess right now it'd probably be a good time to talk about it, but the Broncos made some waves. I don't know if it was last night or this morning, that the report came out that they are going to bench Russell Wilson these last 2 weeks of the season, even though, as you can see in this picture, they are very much in the playoff hunt. But they're going to bench him anyways for the same reason that the Raiders benched Derek Carr a year ago under Josh McDaniels, because he has a clause in his contract that should he get injured, he has guaranteed money coming his way regardless, right? The Broncos have determined he's not our guy. We do not want to pay him that guaranteed money that comes with injury. So we're not going to let him get injured. And I'm sure Russell Wilson feels like he's being done dirty. I saw tweets that showed, and that Russell Wilson is apparently liked on Twitter, that show that his stats, if not this entire season, at least in the past like 8 weeks or something, but I think it's all season, his stats are better than Patrick Mahomes. So I don't know. I'm not saying for the Raiders to go get Russell Wilson. Now, granted, I think Russell Wilson will have all the reason in the world to want to go out there and get revenge on the Broncos. And, I think having that guy on the Raiders to lead that revenge will be interesting. But as I said in our group chat with Josh, I don't think his personality mixes well with the Raiders locker room. I think the Raiders want dogs, and he is a Pomeranian. He can win the pretty pageant show, but he's not that dog that's going to go out there and lead a locker room anymore. Because I think everybody in the world has lost he has lost everybody's respect, it feels like. Former Seahawks teammates have talked massive shit about him. I'm sure in a year or two we'll hear from former Broncos teammates saying shit about him. And I just think that,
if you don't mind me chiming back in, while we're talking about Russell Wilson, the issue seems to be that he regards himself as if he's better than everyone. Like, you can't talk to me unless you schedule an appointment. And I think that absolutely alienates himself from the rest of the locker room, because everybody else is like, it's supposed to be a brotherhood. And, he's not treating it like a brotherhood. He's like, I'm the monarch and you guys are the peasants.
Yeah, and that is I think the perfect way to respond to that is he sounds like he would fit well with Josh McDaniels, not with Antonio Pierce. If that makes sense. If anybody reads what I'm putting out there, that is how I feel about that. So I don't want to risk the locker room environment and culture by signing a guy who has a massive ego like Russell Wilson, or having a coach with a massive ego like whether it's Josh McDaniels, or potentially hiring a new guy, right? I don't want that. I think what Antonio Pierce brings to this locker room and the culture of this team speaks layers to how this defense is playing. So, yeah.
So my question for you, Mike, is it's prediction time. Who's going to win this game versus the Colts?
It's tough. Technically, you're supposed to go first on this, but I'll go.
No, I'll go. Okay. I'm going with the Raiders. That defense is humming. I'm picking Las Vegas. I know it's a road game, and the one player that really stands out to me on the Colts defense, and I don't know if I can ever let it go, is DeForest Buckner. I think he's a great defensive lineman, and he makes it super hard to run the ball. And like you said, the Chiefs players were able to get to Aiden O'Connell a lot.
Yep.
I don't know though. I just don't have a lot of faith in Gardner Minshew as like a long-term, him leading that team to the playoffs versus I don't know. I liked Anthony Richardson, but he's not going to be playing in this game. And I mean, you could even argue that the Colts might be having a worse season if Richardson was still the quarterback. because I just think that the offenses are way different because Richardson brings that running ability that Gardner Minshew doesn't. But this Raiders defense is causing turnovers. They're making life hell for quarterbacks. Malcolm Kuntz has been playing super well. Opposite, like on the opposite side of Max Crosby, it's all coming together, I think, for the Raiders defense.
Yeah.
Give me the Raiders.
I like it. I agree. I also picked the Raiders for the exact same reasons. You bring up DeForest Buckner, and yes, the Colts defense has been playing well this season. I don't know what happened against the Falcons, but I hope it continues. I need to see the Raiders win this game. I know after the Vikings game, it was like, oh man, let's tank, let's get a good pick, let's go pick a quarterback. But you know what, man? Like I think it was Joel who came in here and said, like, I don't really care about the position; it's more about the player that you get. And our rebuttal was like, well, trading draft picks, that sucks, man. Like that hurts. That hurts your roster construction. And it's true, but there are a lot of options out there, and at the end of the day, I just think at the time when the Vikings game ended, it felt like, nah, it's done. The season's over with. I don't care what our chances are for the playoffs. We play the Chiefs in 2 weeks. It's not happening. And the Broncos were playing good at that time. It was like, the Broncos will probably beat us. Like, let's be honest here. They should just tank. And then they win 2 games, and it's like, oh my God, they might make the playoffs. It's like, dude, what is going on here? So I take back a lot of what I said back then. And I think, you know what? This is the last thing I'll say about the Raiders. I think I said the exact same thing in 2021 when the Raiders went and made the playoffs as I'm about to say now. And this time I'm going to mean it because I think I said it in 2021. 2021 season and now this season has proved to me that I really should never root for the Raiders to lose a game. Like obviously I understand the idea of tanking and the value that it has for a franchise to go and get a high draft pick, draft a big player like a quarterback, right? But even when it feels like the season's over, whether it was McDaniels against the Lions, and it's like, we're not doing shit this year, or losing to the Vikings 3-0, it feels like the season's over, and yet it's not. It's not over until you're eliminated. So until the Raiders are eliminated from the playoffs, I'm done rooting for them to lose. I'm done. Mm-hmm. And I think I said that in 2021, but this season has officially proved it to me. Like, do not count your team out until they are eliminated from the playoffs.
Which brings me to this question, Mike. So all of this, 6 of the 8 must happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So does it matter which, like in each bracket, like?
Right. So I explained it while you were gone, but basically right now, what it's showing right now is the 4th seed and below. So 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and then below the 7th, which is the Colts, are the remaining teams that are eligible for the playoffs. What I see as realistic is either the Jags or Texans win the AFC South. And when I say realistic, I mean for the Raiders to make the playoffs. The Raiders still have a chance. I think you mentioned it. The Raiders have a good chance not good. They have a chance at winning the division. They need the Chiefs to win out. And everything I say, regardless, is assuming the Raiders win out. They could lose to the Colts. They could lose to the Broncos. It's ruined. But let's say the Raiders win out. What do they need to happen? As it says, it needs 6 of the 8 things to happen here. I think, and anything that has a check mark means one of those things has already happened. Or I'm sorry, for that team. So next to the Browns, it says they must lose out. They've already won against the Texans. They're going to make the playoffs if they haven't already been clinched. No matter what, I see the Browns as the 5th seed in the playoffs. That's for sure. The 6th and 7th seed are completely open. The Raiders could absolutely be the 6th seed. I see them as potentially the 7th seed, but I saw a Peter Schrager video that said they could be the 6th seed if things went in their way. The Raiders can handle business against the Colts and the Broncos. If they beat both of those teams, the Broncos already lost to the Patriots. They're done. They're below the Raiders should the Raiders win out. And regardless, they play the Broncos. So, again, they control that, right? They control the thing with the Colts because the Colts just lost to the Falcons. They needed to lose 2 games. They lost one of them. They lose to the Raiders. They're cooked. The Texans, they need to lose 2 games. They already lost to the Browns. They have 2 division rivals that they're going to face. Either one of them could play spoiler. The Colts could face them the final week and beat them. It won't matter for us if the Colts win because we already handled business against them. The Steelers, they play the Seattle Seahawks and the Ravens. That's a big question mark because let's say they beat the Seahawks and the Ravens have already clinched the 1 seed going into that final week. The Ravens could bench their starters. So
I don't know if they'll do that again because of what happened a couple of years ago.
What happened?
They benched their starters in the final week of the season, and then they had the first round bye, and then they got eliminated first round of the playoffs because they were rusty.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's it's possible they play the starters, and either way they could play their backups and still be the Steelers. Like the Steelers' offense is not that good. But I'd like to see the Seahawks beat the Steelers and just get that over with and not be worried about that. But the way I see it as realistic is Jags or Texans for the AFC South, Browns, Bills, Raiders. The Raiders need a lot of help, but I think it's all very realistic. You can go team by team. The Bengals, they face the Chiefs and the Browns. Give me 2 losses. All they need is 1. The Colts, all they need to lose to the Raiders, and that's done. Texans, they've already lost 1. All they need to lose is either to the Titans or the Colts, and that's done. You can also go back to the Jags. All they need to lose is to the Panthers, they're not, or the Titans. The Titans could very well play spoiler, and the Jags will be below the Raiders. And then it's just a matter of who wins that division, right? The Texans are getting Stroud back, so I see the Texans, Steelers, and Bills as the biggest threats to the Raiders. I'm just going with forward, assuming the Browns and Bills are the 5th and 6th seeds. What I care about most is how does the AFC South play out, and how do the Steelers play? Because I'm not worried about the Bengals.
So I just wanted to clarify. So any of the 6 of these 8 need to happen.
Yeah. So what happened on each one? It's the team and then what they need to happen.
Yeah, no. I understand that, but it's any combination of 6.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Plus the Raiders winning out.
Yes.
Now, one thing that jumps out to me is, I didn't realize that the Browns are kind of cemented in the in their wild card spot. Joe Flacco has been playing super well, and I know we're not really talking about the Browns. How insane would it be if the Browns went on to win the Super Bowl with Joe Flacco as their quarterback? Because weren't they a wild card team when they won the Super Bowl when he was with the Ravens? A wild card team with what was it?
I know they went to
a Hall of Fame defense. There's not a lot of Hall of Famers besides maybe Myles Garrett on the Browns defense, but they're playing at such an elite level. It's crazy.
That's why I still think Kevin Stefanski is the head coach or the coach of the year this season. But then I was reminded on TikTok that Dan Campbell kind of does deserve it in a way. But I just think what the Browns are doing this year, they are a fucking threat. They are an absolute threat the way that they're playing right now. Their defense is great. And Joe Flacco, I was listening to the Greenlight podcast. That's Chris Long's podcast. And he said, if Joe Flacco played in this offense his entire career, first ballot Hall of Famer. First ballot Hall of Famer. Because he's playing so good right now. It's actually insane.
Now, real quick, before we jump ship to the 49ers, Paulina did ask, or did say, folks, he said the same thing about the Cardinals game last season. Michael, correct me if I'm wrong. And I believe this was referring to the Vikings game. On how the Vikings game kind of ruined, derailed the whole playoff thing. And last season, losing to the Cardinals was huge in the long run. I think that's what Paulina is making the reference to.
Sorry, you said, what was your last part that you said?
About a game that happened earlier on in the season going back to biting the playoff hopes. Like the Raiders last season was the Cardinals game that ended out biting them in the butt.
Yeah.
This
I mean, this is
year
the thing.
might be the Vikings game.
Yes. Okay. Gotcha. 100%. Because I was confused because there's last year's Cardinals game that killed the Raiders moving forward, towards the end of the season. But then there's also that, and I know she said last year, so yeah, she is correct. So this is something I say every year to my dad. And I literally, before the podcast, we were talking about it. Okay. The Raiders are 7-8, along with the Broncos at the bottom of this list, right? Then the rest of the teams up till the Bengals and the Jags, besides the Browns, all of them are 8-7. So if you just give me either the Vikings game or the Bears game this season, you could throw in the Week 4 Charger game or even the Week 3 Steelers game. If you give me one win in one of those 4 games, we're 8-7, and we don't even need to win out to make the playoffs. That's just one game. One game that makes the difference, right? That's huge. So yeah, she's dead on. I mean, last year the Cardinals game was like they were up 20-0 at halftime, and they blew it. And there were multiple games like that. The Jaguars game last year, there were other games. So that's just been a thing with the Raiders in many recent years is like they're good enough to win these games, and yet they don't. And then there's other games against, like, say, a really good Chargers team or something like that where they win, and it's like, holy shit, we beat the Chargers. And then a week or two later, they play a team like, say, the Panthers this year, and we lose. And it's like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, if we win these games that we're supposed to win, we're a playoff team. But whether it's the quarterback play from a guy like Derek Carr or this season, Aiden O'Connell, which I'm not blaming him for like the Bears game or whichever games that he was not in, obviously. That was Jimmy Garoppolo and Josh McDaniels. But in recent years, it's been like Derek Carr being up and down, right? And then also a really shitty defense. It's like this year we have the defense, and now we don't have the quarterback, right? It's like, so as I've said multiple times this podcast, just give me that quarterback. If this defense can keep it up with the leadership from Antonio Pierce and Patrick Graham, sky is the limit. We can finally be that team that goes out there and wins the games that they're supposed to win. And hopefully have a fucking, 12-win season, 13-win season next year. Maybe. Is that realistic? Probably not, but a guy can dream, right? If we can go and make the playoffs with another interim head coach, who knows what we can do if we have the right quarterback.